And if you would give your name and address, please.
Brinkley Pound, 1916 Leonard Street. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you concerning the proposed construction plans of St. Paul United Methodist Church on Wildwood Avenue. My name is Brinkley Pound and my address is 1916 Leonard Street. The church surrounds several neighborhoods under the control of the Board of Historical and Architectural Review, but the church itself is not. In addition, the church is not subject to the oversight of the zoning or planning commissions. As Rick Jones, Director of Planning for Columbus, stated at the May 8th public meeting regarding the closure of Leonard Street, St. Paul can go pretty much where they want to, and there's not a whole lot they have to do to continue with their proposed plans. This public forum is the only opportunity for anyone in the neighborhood surrounding St. Paul Church to speak to their construction plans, which include the closing of Leonard Street between Forest and Wildwood Avenues, the demolition of 2 homes, and the construction of 1 more parking lot. I will use my time here to explore the overall issues of this construction plan, which Ryan Clements, along with Will Clyott, Tim Farmer, Will Barnes, and Philip Thayer, presented to City Council on April the 11th. Thank you for listening to my concerns. I object to the demolition of perfectly habitable homes in one of Columbus's most established and diverse neighborhoods. The school district recently demolished this house for more parking. The church has already demolished this house and intends to demolish this home and this home, all for parking lots. I object to the destruction of mature canopy trees that are home to creatures of all kinds in our neighborhood. I object to the laying down of more asphalt in our neighborhood for parking lots. It is not necessary, nor is it appropriate. I object to the adding of more paved surfaces that will exacerbate the ongoing flooding issues at Lake Bottom Park, as there is not sufficient mitigation protocols in St. Paul's proposed plans. At present, the church has over 75 off-street parking lot spaces, along with Sunday access to the multitude of on-street parking spaces on adjacent roadways, and they have access to over 300 spaces at Columbus High School. Since the request to close Leonard Street was made known to the neighborhood in March, we've gathered data on the use of their current parking spaces. They do not currently use what they have. On average, there are 20 vacant spaces in the Leonard Street lot and many vacant on-street spaces available on Sundays. Per the Unified Development Ordinance Code, Chapter 4, Article 3, Section 4.3.1 and 4, the location of required parking should reduce the number of entrances and exits to public roadways, as well as reduce the number of vehicles entering or exiting public roads and streets. At present, there's one entrance from Leonard Street to the back lot at St. Paul, an entrance to the chapel lot, and one entrance to an unpaved lot. The closure of Leonard Street and the acceptance of their parking lot design will create 2 more exits on Wildwood, an exit on Girard, and an exit on 21st Street. In addition, as I have indicated to the Chief of Police and the Fire Chief, the proposed construction plan would move the access point of their dumpster to Forest Avenue, thereby blocking this roadway and interfering with the traffic flow and with public safety access. Finally, this portion of Leonard Street is an arterial road designed to provide the highest level of service between 2 major avenues, Wildwood and Forest, as the only 2-way street between Girard and 17th, serving for the safety of the neighborhood and the access of emergency vehicles, over 100 residents, as well as Columbus High School students and St. Paul members. The proposed construction plan will increase the surface parking at St. Paul by over 200% and will create more than 500 parking lot spaces in the non-commercial block bordered by 17th, Cherokee, Forest, and Wildwood Avenues. Aaron Ben Joseph, an urban studies and planning professor from MIT and author of the book Rethinking the Lot, The Design and Culture of Parking, found that there are at least 4.5 parking spaces for every vehicle in the United States. That is over 800 million parking spaces. This does not include garages, driveways, and street parking. He also found that as much as 35% of cities are covered in surface lots, which account for 70% of the parking space supply. Environmentally, he says, paving over huge swaths of land is not a very good idea. Today's culture is becoming more urban, that is, more people on foot or bikes or using mass transit, which lessens the parking demand. Our city code provides a remedy for the overbuilding of surface parking lots in the Columbus UDO, Article 3, Section 4.3.12, which states that the council may, as a part of the approval of a new or expanded use, new construction, substantial renovation, or alteration or expansion of an existing site, approve the use of shared parking to reduce the overall parking requirements. The basis for such an application is to establish shared parking for complementary uses, such as the use of a building or structure, and in this case, existing parking lots at Columbus High School, for two or more usage which possess complementary rather than competing peak hours of usage. As such is the case here. I urge council to exercise their right by ordinance to protect and preserve our neighborhoods so that this residential area remains safe for all residents and continues to be a walkable and bikeable neighborhood with complete street access. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fallon.
And
Mr. City Manager.
Madam Mayor Pro Tem, we'll hear from our Director of Engineering, Ms. Donna Newman. And of course, I see that there are a number of people in the audience. I don't know if they are for or against this, but I presume they are one or the other. And so I'm going to have her to come and share with us on
And
Leonard
so
Street.
that finished our public agenda also.
Yes. Ms. Newman.
Yes. Good morning. Just for council's reference, in your informational section for this week, there was a draft resolution and a draft agenda report giving you some more information. Our intention is to bring this back for consideration at next council meeting, which will be next Tuesday. At April 11th, the St. Paul, representatives from St. Paul came forward and introduced to council their proposal to expand their church facilities. And part of that was the inclusion of Leonard Street, and I passed out, just for everybody else's reference, it's just a copy of their proposed site plan, so that you would have a visual of what they're proposing to do at this point in time. On May 8th, at council's request, we had a public meeting that was held here at the City Service Center, and received comments from the residents and members of the church that attended. And also, there was 50-plus people that attended that meeting. And then on May 15, we had received some concerns from the neighborhood, and we met in a home on Leonard Street with some of the neighborhoods members that had some concerns about the proposed closure. At council's request, I had the fire department, the police department, and based on some comments from the residents, I had the school district review their proposed site plan to see if there would be any concerns as far as response times, public safety, school traffic, and none of those three had any concerns. We also took some traffic counts out there. On average, we counted approximately 234 cars a day, and then about 217 on Saturday and 150 on Sunday. And so we had a proposal. I've been working with Councilor Garrett, and I'm sure he's going to comment shortly. But I had a proposal from St. Paul on some conditions that they thought they could live with that would address some of the issues from the neighborhood. And then I had responses from the neighborhood on some concerns that they had, and these are similar to some of the concerns that were expressed at these meetings that we had. And so I put together a draft, what I thought was a draft resolution for discussion purposes as a starting point, because this is somewhat of an unusual case. From a traffic standpoint, there's no real benefit for Leonard. The church owns both sides of the property. Now, I'm sure the neighborhood might argue that some of those utilize those streets and some of the students utilize the streets. But from just the traffic volume, there's no real need for that particular section of the street. So in my conversations, and I've had a lot of conversations over the last several weeks with a lot of people, this is a very passionate thing for the neighbors, and I understand that as well as the church. And even, I'll just note, even Midtown couldn't come to a consensus. They were kind of split as well on this particular project, if you will. And just so you'll know, for our, in your draft resolution, just general comments that I had, again, with members of the project team, I guess, from St. Paul yesterday. They are willing to meet with the neighbors on a routine basis just to keep them informed, but they're concerned about the control of the project and them maintaining. They do want to work with the neighbors and resolve some of their concerns. They did note that they no longer intend on relocating the dumpster. It's going to stay in its current location. That was a concern that was brought up from the neighbors. They are in process of trying to repair and replace the existing air cooler, which is one of the major concerns that we hear from the neighborhood, and we experienced it ourselves when we were at the meeting. We could hear it. They do commit to maintaining pedestrian access. They're going to leave it as part of their design, is that area will be open so that people that have used it in years past for walking will still be able to do that. Now, they did caution me that it's not necessarily going to be ADA compliant, and that's due to the existing grades of the area. Their site will be ADA compliant, but it's not going to be designed specifically for that purpose for the public to travel through there. But it'll be open where people can continue to walk through there. And then the lighting, there was a discussion about the lighting, and there is a regulation currently in the UDO that requires fixtures that cut off at the property line. That was put in the UDO in 2004 when it was adopted, so that is something that they will have to comply with, regardless if it's a condition of the resolution or not. As well as there was some concern about the hours of operation, and that too will have to comply with the noise ordinance. So that will be something that's regulated. I know there was some discussion about the number of parking. They have not submitted a parking study. That will be part of the process. We'll review their existing and their proposed parking, and it'll have to comply with the UDO requirements as well. And stormwater, they'll have to comply with all the stormwater regulations for water quality and increase in runoff.
So, Mayor Pro Tem, I want to thank staff for getting in the middle of this and trying to bring back information that can help you make a decision on this matter. And we do have a draft resolution in your package today that we will have on my agenda next week. And we will be asking for a vote. And of course, I know that there are a lot of people out there, and we're done with the public agenda. And as I said, I don't know if you're here for or against. I just know you're here. But if you are, if you're against it, if you would just wave your hand, let me see who's here. If you're for it, raise your hand. Let me see. Okay, I just trying to be clear. And so we'll answer any questions that you have, but I think her report was pretty simple and clear. And so we will bring back a resolution next week. Mayor Pro Tem, the engineering director is here to answer any questions, if there are questions.
I was trying, there was an email I got, and I was trying to find it.
Okay.
That there was, a lady had some concerns about some of the issues on Leonard Street. I can't remember her name.
I don't know either, but if you find it and you provide it to us, we'll see if we can address those issues or concerns.
Okay.
But if there are no questions, thank you, Director Newman, and we'll bring a resolution next week.
Okay, thank you.
Don't leave.
Councilman Thomas.
Mr. City Manager, as I understand, what we will be requested to vote on next week is whether or not, our only issue would be whether or not to declare Leonard Street surplus and therefore make it available for acquisition by the church. The other items that are in your report and in Ms. Pound's presentation are things that would typically and normally be addressed during the usual permitting of the construction. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, ma'am, that is a correct statement, and there has been lengthy conversations between my office and the city attorney's office. If council so wishes to add some conditions in the resolution as part of that street closure, then we can make those a condition of the permit, and then they're then enforceable if we make them a condition of the permit. Now, council can vote simply to abandon the street and declare it surplus, and then the city manager will dispose of it in accordance with normal city procedures and policies. And then they would be bound by what's normally in the UDO, which a lot of these conditions are, but there were some specific requests that the neighborhood had, such as opportunities for communication and being kept informed, and thus that was why there was a requirement for them to meet routinely with the neighborhood just to keep them up to date. I think there were some past concerns about the church making promises, and then the neighborhood didn't feel they were fulfilled, and there may have been reasons for that, I don't know. But we just wanted to make sure that if there were any conditions, that we had them in the resolution, and then we can make them part of the permit.
Well, one of my concerns is that we typically have projects like this brought to you,
Yes, ma'am.
or to the engineering department or the planning department or whomever, that never get to us because of the regulations that are already in place, and that you, in your capacity as the director of engineering, the engineering department, enforce. And so it's only those that particularly, I guess one of the things that I'm trying to remember is that typically the kinds of issues that we get where there are conditions applied are in zoning.
Yes, ma'am.
And not in construction pieces. I mean, as long as what the church is wanting to do meets those requirements, we, council, do not typically get involved in that. Is that the pattern?
Yes, ma'am, that is a true statement.
Well, I'm a little concerned that we may be setting a precedent here that we don't need to set. This is, Ms. Newman, your job. So I don't know, Mr. City Manager, if I'm making myself
Yes.
clear. I just don't want us to go overboard And yet I want us to protect the neighborhood.
Yes, ma'am.
I want us to work with the church and so forth, but our responsibility at this time as a council deals with Leonard Street
Yes, ma'am.
and not with any of the other construction that may or may not go on that site.
That is correct. And if
Yeah.
council so wishes, we will move forward and we will review it like we do any other project.
And as long as the church's project meets the requirements, even if there are new requirements that you've put on, such as meeting with the neighborhood, I'm not sure that's an issue that council needs to take an official position on.
So,
The official position is what is a little disconcerting to me, Mr. City Manager.
yeah, and let me just read the way the resolution is going to read, and then you'll have to tell me what's different, if anything.
We would just remove those conditions. It would just be the normal declaring it, abandoning the
Okay,
street, declaring
gotcha.
it surplus and
Okay.
disposal.
Because it
Right.
reads at,
The conditions will just be taken out, but
Yes.
the resolution is still being tweaked, the language to conform with state law.
okay, so, Counselor, that is exactly what we'll do.
Okay.
And so the wording in the resolution will be adjusted. I can tell you, we're going to do exactly that, and you're right. Because as it reads now, it's abandonment of Leonard Street, resolution deleting from the official map of Consolidated Government of Columbus, Georgia, the improved segment of Leonard Street between the east right-of-way on Forest Avenue and the west right-of-way land on Wildwood Avenue, declaring it surplus and authorizing its disposal in accordance with city code and under the conditions outlined in the approved resolution. So we will remove the conditions.
Correct.
And you simply would be voting on the other language.
And I want to, I hope, reassure some of the folks from the neighborhood that by our removing those from the official action of council does not mean that those conditions won't be met. But I think council gets involved in enough minutia without taking on more than we typically do. So that's my concern.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
thank you. Thank you,
Councilor Garrett.
Director.
Councilor Thomas. Councilor Thomas, I certainly understand where you're coming from. I will say that the church has been very willing to, there are, I guess, conditions that are part of the resolution that they didn't necessarily want, and they've been very willing to do, and Ms. Pound has been very gracious in working with the church too and trying to get some things met that would at least make the neighborhood somewhat happy. And I mean, I do want to bring out, I mean, this is a compromise. Nobody is completely happy, and the church has been very willing. They're spending more money and agreed to spend more money than they need to. Necessarily, they could have an above-ground detention pond, which if you look at the plan design, I know the public can't see that, but there's one by the parking lot that they'll be required to put in, and that's going to cost them a significant amount more money to put it underground. So there's nothing visible. And I mean, there are conditions that, I know the neighbors have worked very hard with the church they have found some that they do agree on. I know the church will be clarifying those, but you know, that's the result of there've been a lot of public meetings I've gone to and a lot of private meetings, and I know that's kind of an unusual circumstance, but as long as it's something that everybody can agree to, I mean, I'd like to see them as part of the resolution if we can, but.
One of the issues I remember in the email, and you talked about earlier, about the sounding of the air conditioning and how it went on all day and all night. And what can we get them to do about that?
Yes, yes, ma'am. My understanding in conversations with the church is they are actively working on that. They are actively repairing and potentially replacing that existing system, as well as providing additional methods to, like a sound barrier, if you will, to reduce the noise from that particular unit.
Will that be made a part of the resolution?
Not the conditions. No, I think they will just agree that they're doing certain things.
Right.
The resolution, we're trying to keep council in the lane that council should probably be in, and the balance of that will come through.
So none of the conditions that have been brought out will be written down?
Well, I think they are in writing. The church has agreed to them in writing. They just you won't be voting on those because this is not an ordinance, it's a resolution.
When the property is made surplus, is it not put out for bid?
On streets, typically, it's,
Well, this is going to be an abandonment under state law of a street segment, so that those provisions that you're talking about, a possible surplus sale with sealed bids, that won't come into play here. This is going to be an abandonment of a portion of a street by this council under state law.
Okay. I know when 4th Street came to council to try to do that down in front of that church, I thought it was said then that we would not be doing any more street abandonment for churches.
I'm sorry.
When we had that contested abandonment request from 4th Street, I thought it was said then that we would not be doing any more street abandonments.
Well, it's totally council's discretion
It is
whether you
council's
deem this in the public interest. Under the state law, you can abandon a portion of this street or any other street if you find it to be in the public interest.
Councilman Garrett?
Just to speak to that point, I wasn't on council when that decision was made, obviously, but I can tell you the project that has been presented is something that's the result of a lot of compromise, and there's a lot here that's a lot more expensive than it needs to be. And if we don't abandon Leonard Street, they don't have the project integrity, and the church can pretty much do what they want to, as was discussed earlier. Churches have a lot of leeway, so we'll have a project that'll be piecemeal if we do not abandon Leonard Street, or we can have a project where the neighborhood has some input and the church is able to have a complete project. So I just want councilors to know that. If we don't abandon it, then we don't really there's no say from anybody on it. But right now, it's something that will flow together very well. And also, there's some safety concerns because there's going to be a youth building where the street is right now. It'll be across the street from it, so.
thank you, Ms. Newman.
I see no more questions.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, I'm going to go into the city manager's agenda.
Okay.
No.
It's not a public hearing, it's just a public. Madam Clerk, would you please put it to the record that I'll be abstaining from discussion and voting on this particular issue, on the Leonard Street issue?
We're going to call forward Mr. Arnett. If you'll come forward, I'll put your time on the clock. It'll be 2 5-minute, just like it was before. So this is Mr. Robert Arnett, who's here to speak to us about Leonard Street. And we'll put your first 5-minute segment on the clock. Thank you.
My name is Robert Arnett. I live at the corner of Cherokee and Leonard Street. I am against the closing of Leonard Street. I've been asked by our neighborhood to speak on their behalf, and I would like to ask who could explain the legal repercussions far better than my attorney and the neighborhood's attorney, Mark Post, to delineate those.
If I may, Ms. Mayor. May it please the mayor and the council, city manager, and the city attorney. I represent a group of taxpayers, some Columbus taxpayers that live in the neighborhood of St. Paul United Methodist Church. Now, they oppose the closing of Leonard Street because they use it frequently to go to cross country, to go to work, to go to Macon Road, to go to friends' houses. They oppose it because it's going to have some potential traffic impacts. And they oppose it because it will potentially change the character of their neighborhood. Your own traffic numbers support what they have to say, and their contention that Leonard Street is useful and convenient to them, that is, the public. Now, your numbers, by my math, saying 260 days for 5 days a week, times 234 vehicles per day on weekdays would add up to 60,840 cars per year. Let's take half of that number and say, for the sake of argument, you've got 30,000 vehicles on that street a year just during the weekdays, taking into account that those numbers came from when school was in session at Columbus High School. And also keep in mind, I'm assuming each one of you are familiar with the area. Keep in mind that Sonoya Street is a one-way street. I have, and I'm not sure who to hand it to, 2 affidavits for your review.
You can hand it to the clerk at the conclusion of your comments if you'd like.
Okay. And I have 22 copies, one for each of you.
Okay.
And the 2 affidavits set forth how the 2 neighbors, these 2 particular neighbors, use the street. And with regard to one of the neighbors, there's a petition attached to it. I believe most of you have seen a petition wherein they collected names. When I say they, I mean a number of people that live in the neighborhood went around knocking on doors and got some names. There are 161 names on the petition. 11 of those names have been stricken through because those people indicated that they did not want to oppose the church or oppose this, and that leaves 150 names. So divide that in 2, and you've still got a large number of people that use that road and are opposed to this particular closure of Leonard Street. So the resolution itself and common sense show that the closing of Leonard Street is solely to the benefit of St. Paul United Methodist Church. It's their petition. The language in the resolution says they are the ones that want to get this property deeded to them. Now, nobody is arguing that St. Paul has any evil intent or anything of that sort by filing its petition. A lot of my friends, I think, attend that church. A lot of good people, some counselors. St. Paul is a well-respected church. It has many prominent members. I know for sure that that church committee probably worked very hard to put this proposal forward. And my clients likewise have a lot of friends that go to that church. And we can all see why the church would want the road closed. But St. Paul is a person in the sense of, or according to the Georgia Code. Is that my 5 minutes?
It's your 5 minutes, you get another 5 minutes.
It's a private individual as defined by Official Code of Georgia 32-1-3.
Let me say, Tiash, I hadn't got the time running yet. I think the gentleman has the affidavits. If you want to get them to Tiasha, she'll hand them out to counselors.
Here they are. Thank you.
And he said he had 2 different affidavits.
And they're labeled in the
Each,
file
okay.
folders.
All right, here goes your second. Got it.
Thank you, Ms. Mayor. So St. Paul is a person, at least in the legal sense. It's made up of many individuals, but it's a corporation. And so as such, it is clearly, according to the law, a benefit for an individual, for St. Paul. And as such, case law says that it would be an abuse of power. In fact, a gross, and I'm quoting here, a gross abuse of power if it is done solely for the benefit of a private individual. So there's case law that is against this too, besides just the people that are petitioning or that are opposing this. And I would say we could stand here all night long arguing case law. I don't have all night, and these people behind me might tar and feather me if I did. And we could talk about the vagueness of the statute that controls this. And in fact, the controlling statute doesn't define what, quote, otherwise in the best public interest means. In fact, as I would suggest, since this is a church matter, it's broad as the plan of salvation and would be subject to challenge in court, a vagueness challenge. The phrase taken to its logical conclusion would allow any government to close any road by rotely stating that it served the public interest because the government had no longer had to spend money to maintain the road. That would allow closure of any road. And the law is clear that counties and cities and governmental units have to maintain roads. They have to maintain public roads in a way that ordinary traffic can traverse the roads. Citizens, ordinary citizens, any individual can enforce that duty and their rights by a writ of mandamus. If the council were to grant this, they could go to Superior Court and file a writ. I would argue to you that if you close this road on the basis that it is in, quote, the best public interest, you will essentially be saying that no citizen has the right to insist that public roads be properly maintained for ordinary traffic. This should not and cannot be done legally. But setting aside potential costs for stoplights or litigation or that sort of thing, maybe the most important thing for this council to consider is precedent. If you do this, what stops St. Luke from coming before council and asking council to close 3rd Avenue or 11th Street? They obviously pay for crossing guards to get their kids across the road. It would be more convenient for them, I'm betting, to have that happen. What would prevent 4th Street Baptist Church from coming back to this council again? I believe they were here in 99, 2000, and asking for a road closure there. That was not allowed the last time they were before council. I think Historic Columbus got involved. Essentially, if this road closure is allowed over objection and when it's being used by the public in a substantial way, we would be allowing and setting up a situation where the council would be inundated with these requests from private individuals and corporations and just anybody that might need a road closure. So I know my time's about to run out, but the bottom line is we, and I represent these neighbors, we want the church to do well. We want the members of the church to do well. We want the neighborhood to do well. We want everybody to coexist. But we want Leonard Street to stay open. It should stay open according to the law. And the council can achieve what the church wants to achieve by maybe putting a speed limit on the road, allowing traffic at 10 or 15 miles an hour. The church has other alternatives too, crossing guards. So we would ask each of you to consider what is, and I'm about done, truly in the best public interest. The interest of all of the citizens of Columbus, Georgia. The citizens as a whole, and we ask you to exercise your sound discretion, and it's your decision, to deny the closure since the road is used.
Okay.
And since closing it would set a bad precedent, which
Thank
this
you.
council will struggle with for years.
Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Thank you for your time. We do have the affidavits. We appreciate it. The city attorney has apprised me that actually this is not an item on second reading, that the way this is couched, this particular resolution will be heard as a public hearing. And so that concludes your comments.
Indeed.
And we appreciate
Ms.
you
Mayor.
being here.
Thank you,
If
council.
anybody would like to speak for or against, you may at this time. We have heard before, by the way, so the fact that people aren't storming the podium, we have had public comment before on this matter, so don't think there aren't people for or opposed. We've heard from many, many. We have Councilor Garrett.
I would like to,
Okay, hold on a moment.
I would like to substitute the revised resolution. The reason for that is the last one had language in there that the neighbors consented basically to this, and I wanted that removed because obviously we have folks here who are not for it. I do want to note that the church did want to keep the conditions in there, even though the neighbors weren't necessarily consenting to closure, so I think that was a very big act of goodwill on their part. And also wanted to mention that, I mean, I've been meeting with them extensively. I've met with neighbors, I've gone to the community meetings, and there are things that the neighbors want that aren't in the conditions, but the church is going to try and do. They're planning on putting in trees that are twice as large as the ordinances require. They're planning on replacing a good amount more trees than they'll be pulling out. And in general, I mean, they have different plans like that, plans on respecting the neighbors as far as when they're going to conduct construction. They couldn't put in the condition like construction, for example, because if there's a massive deluge, they can't guarantee they're going to be in and out and not be able to work on a weekend. But they are going to make best efforts to do that and respect the neighbors. So I know it's not everything the neighbors want. I know they're still not happy. But we have spent a lot of time, and St. Paul is trying to do what they can to make you happy. I know y'all aren't going to be completely happy, but they are trying. So,
Okay.
But I would make the motion to substitute the revised resolution.
Okay, this is a motion to substitute and a second. Any discussion on the motion to substitute? Hearing none, all those in favor? Okay, hold on. We've got Councilor Henderson.
Thank you, Mayor, and I think my neighbor here probably wants to make a comment as well, but I am a member of St. Paul, have been for over 25 years, and while I think it's questionable as to whether or not the legal reasons that I should recuse myself at the urging of our city attorney and solely because of his urging, I am going to ask to be recused from this vote, and I would assume that any modifications of this resolution, I would also necessarily have to recuse myself. So I would request that of my fellow councilors right now.
Okay. Let's see if we could do a joint motion. Councilor
Yes, I was
Baker.
just going to ask the Madam Clerk to read that same into the record for both of us, please, ma'am.
Okay, so that's a motion on behalf of Councilor Henderson and Councilor Baker to be recused from this matter and all subparts thereof. So motion second. No further discussion. All those in favor, please state aye. All right. Any opposed? Okay, and so now we have on the table Councilor Garrett's motion to substitute. Is there a second? Second. Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion to substitute the ordinance, or the resolution, excuse me? Seeing none, all those in favor, please state aye. Are there any opposed? Okay, now with the substituted motion on the table, which includes conditions, yes, ma'am, if you'd like to speak, come state your name and address, please.
I'm Eleanor Hardigree, and I'm a neighbor.
and I want the street to stay open. Councilor Garrett met with one member of our neighborhood, but not with our group. He only met with one. And her whole issue was the planting and the trees. Our issue is the street. I use that street every single day, several times a day. The only time I don't use it is on Sunday. So it's used always. We're real anxious not to close it. That's part of our life there. The drive time traffic is terrible on Cherokee. It's terrible on 17th. The Columbus High traffic is bad on Cherokee and on Forest. So we scoot right up Winton and cross and go up to Wildwood and either go to Winton Road or we go to Hilton Avenue. That's our way out during a lot of the day. I would urge you to please think about the neighbors. This is not, this is not just the church. A lot of us live there. And we've got people all around, not just on our street and not just on Wildwood and Forest who are opposed to it too because they use it. So please think carefully before you vote. We urge you to leave the street open. That won't harm the church. It won't do anything to the building that they're planning. I don't really have any objections to that. I don't like to see a lot of building in a neighborhood, but that's their property. They own that. They don't own the street. And I think we own part of the street because we're citizens. We want it open.
Thank you. Anyone else for or against that would like to speak at this time?
Okay, let me just say, Mayor, for the record, this is a public hearing for the abandonment of a portion of Leonard Street between Wildwood and Forest Avenue. It's been duly noticed on the Ledger Inquirer last week and this morning's paper that people have spoken in opposition and in favor last week. But if there's anybody else, this is the last call to be heard for or against. Please raise your hand if you want to be heard. All right.
Okay. Then we'll entertain a motion to approve the substitute motion. All right. And do we have a second? Second. Is there any further discussion on this matter? Seeing that there's none, the item has been pulled up on the agenda, and the item is queued for voting. Okay, and the item does pass. What we will do at this time is just give you a moment that if you were here, and unless you just want to stay and see your government in action, we'll give you a moment to leave. What's that? You want to stay?